Hey guys, Bobby here, and if you've been following video news recently, you know that Adobe just raised the bar for editing software with the addition of their content-aware fill feature in their video editing suite. And if you're like me, a woeful Final Cut user who does not want to make the switch, and your brain is racing with all the beautiful things that content-aware could do for your films, then this video is for you. That's right guys, in this video I want to show you how to get some similar results to Content Aware right here in Final Cut Pro X with no additional software. If you don't know what Content Aware is, it's a feature that lets a user essentially remove nearly anything from their photo or video with just a few clicks. And it first popped up in Photoshop and has now made its way over to the video side of the Adobe suite. And while I'm sure there are limitations to the software, the results that I've seen have been incredibly impressive. The good news is that you can achieve similar results using masks in Final Cut. Now it's going to be much more work than just a few clicks, and it's not going to work in every single scenario, but I hope this tutorial allows you to hold tight and hope that Final Cut gets a similar update soon. And real quick, if you like this video or you want to see more videos like this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, making sure to also hit the notification bell to be the first to see new posts. So let's jump into Final Cut and get started. All right, so here we are in Final Cut 10, and we're gonna look at two different clips, neither of which I consider to be easy, as the easiest would be something just on a tripod with no movement and lots of space around the object that you're removing. But it's also nothing insanely difficult either. So our first clip here is a bride and groom, and they're walking across this field, and I don't like this. I'll zoom in here and show you. There's like, I don't know what it is, garbage can or something. In the corner, not really the corner, just on the left side there. So I'm gonna fit it. You can see what size it is. So, you know, it's not giant. It's not like taking out a huge water tower or anything, but it's also not small. And to me, it's just a little bit of an eyesore. So the first step you're gonna do, you're gonna take your clip, you're gonna do Command C, and then Command V. You're just gonna duplicate it, bring it down, and then you're just gonna stack these clips. Then with the bottom clip selected here, you're gonna hit V, and that's gonna turn that clip off. So as we get into the masks, you want to be able to see what you're masking, basically. So that just kind of turns it off for right now. We will turn it back on later. Then we're going to go into, actually have it already pulled up here as you can see, but you're just going to go into the effects tab here, and you can just go to the mask section, or you can search mask, or whatever, however you want to get here. There are a variety of masks that you can use. Some already have like predetermined shapes like this. We're going to use draw mask though, because everything that we're doing is probably a unique shape, and we're going to drag that onto the top clip. And as you can see, nothing has changed, but you'd have this little message here of clicking to add a control point. So that is what we're going to do. So you're going to zoom in as far as you need to get a good look at what you're masking out. This is probably fine. I might go a little bit further. Actually, 200% is fine. I don't want to go to 400. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click, and you're basically going to draw out this mask. You'll see me do it in a second. And one thing to note is that it helps to have a kind of a point of interest on your map, or on your mask, a point that you set in your mask that you know that point lines up with a specific point of the object, or just outside of the object, and that will help you with a step a little bit later. So if you can, line up a corner or something like that, that's always very helpful. So you're gonna go around and add those points in now. So I'm gonna start down here. This is kind of like you don't have to be super specific. If you want also, if your object is round, you can click and hold and then drag, and that's gonna round out those edges like that. But mine doesn't have to be that round. Come up here, and you can add these as close together as you want. And I'll put this one, this is gonna be kind of my control point. I'm gonna put it right above that corner, and then at the very last one, you just wanna connect all of them like that. And now you can see it actually masked out everything else. And again, this is because our bottom clip is turned off, that everything is black right now. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna actually go in here, and you're gonna hit invert mask, and that's gonna kind of make the opposite happen. All right, so now we're gonna work on the position of the mask. So you go under transform here, and this line right here, which is position. And we're gonna go through and we're gonna keyframe this position the entire way through. We're gonna go ahead and you're gonna start, you wanna bring your playhead all the way back, hit this keyframe button. I think there's also a shortcut, but I always forget what it is. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna go frame by frame, and every 3 frames or so, it depends how much movement is in your shot, but every few frames you're gonna realign your mask using that one kind of lining up point that I told you to find. And you're gonna do this all the way until the end of your clip. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I've hit the keyframe button, so that first frame is keyframe, then I'm just gonna go forward, maybe 3. And then you don't have to hit the keyframe button every time. Once you move, it will just readjust. And you're gonna move that back. 1, 2, 3. Move it back. 1, 2, 3. Move it back. All right, so there we are at the end. And then what you wanna do is I like to just watch through it one more time and just make sure you don't miss anything. You can see it kind of wiggling around, but there's no point in there that I see my object showing, which is what I want. So from here, you're gonna go back, click on your bottom clip, and you're gonna hit V to turn it back on, and you'll notice that the spot or the object has basically reappeared. And the reason for this is that your mask has not moved at all. That first step was to set the mask, and now we're going to kind of fill the mask, if that makes sense. So with your bottom clip selected here, you're going to go over here to the transform tool or area, and you're going to drag this frame around, and this is going to be your bottom clip showing through that mask. And so you're going to just basically drag this around until you find something that looks like it fits, and you need to pay attention to your surroundings. So especially if you have like lines, which we're going to get into, or here, I kind of feel like there's a little bit of like a hill here and kind of like this like a bush here. So you want to just kind of find something that maybe fits with that. Like that, I feel like obviously you can see the harsh edges, but we're going to take care of that in a little bit. But in general, I would say this looks pretty good. So from here, you're going to need to dial in the details of your mask and kind of polish it up to get rid of those edges. So you can go back into your first clip with the mask here, and you're going to mostly be playing around with the feather and the fall off. And this is going to vary case by case on how much feather, how much fall off, or how little of these things you need. So just play around with it and see what works. After you think that you have a setup that you like with the feather and the fall off, you can play through it. Mine hasn't rendered, but you can see it moving around. It generally looks okay. And one thing to really keep in mind with this is that right now you're zoomed in 200%, and this is taking up a good chunk of the frame. Whereas when you're showing the full clip, it's very small in frame. So you definitely want to go for, as close to perfection as you can, but it has to be within reason, because you might kind of work yourself to death going for that perfect shot. So I have it lined up how I want here. I'll get rid of these dots. We can play it in the wider frame here. And even that, you can see like a tiny bit of it moving with some edges. But for the most part, it's pretty darn good. So then a few things that I also like to pay attention to and play around with to see if it changes when doing this on this clip is going to be the scale. So it's kind of just another way to blend this a little bit more. So we'll go back in to 200% here. And if you have like some harsh edges, I mean, you can barely even tell where the mask is actually on this at this point without the movement. But if you take the bottom clip and you scale it up a little bit, now you can see where that is. But if you scale it up, you can kind of blend even more. I'm gonna play around with this feather and fall off. And this is exactly what this is gonna look like, where you're kind of just going back and forth between like scaling it and playing with the feathering, and because that scale allowed me to increase the feathering to not reveal the trash can or whatever that was, and gives me a little more room to play with because it spreads it out kind of. So like that's looking pretty good to me. And you can even always adjust to like go back into transform and adjust that around. You can see the trash can there, but something like that. So playing with that scale can add a little extra bit. I might not have done a perfect job keyframing it. You can see it wiggling back and forth a little bit, but it's pretty darn good. And especially when you zoom all the way out and you play this clip all the way through, take all this off for you. It's gonna look pretty good, and especially when it's not the subject, it's something very much in the background, you're not gonna see it very much. So if you're looking for that, you can kind of pick it out right there. There's a few frames where you see it move a little bit too much, and that might be my keyframing, but if you're not looking for that, you do not see it. In fact, even if you're looking for it, you could very easily think that was just wind blowing that bush. So that's the end of the first clip there. We'll play it all the way through one more time. And then we're gonna go into the second clip. And this is a dress shot here where I am pulling back. And right now it all looks perfect. And eventually you'll notice kind of at the tail end, I accidentally forgot to take out a cup from Panera. So that is showing up on the fireplace or on the mantle there. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna do our best to take that out. Now I'm going to approach this in the exact same way. So I'm gonna breeze through a few of these steps and then I'm gonna really just stop in the points that are different for this one. So we're gonna Command C, Command V, now it came up over here. Put it down here, make sure to line them up and turn this one off. Then in here, we're gonna add our Draw Mask tool. And we're gonna zoom in nice and close. And this one gives us some unique things to deal with. Let me get over here. So a couple things is that it doesn't start in frame. It starts out of frame, so it's something that comes into frame. And it's also right up on a variety of things. So with the other clip, we had bushes and trees around that were in the background, and they're kind of all tangled, and you can't really make out any specific lines. But for this, we have two specific lines. We have the curtain here that it's right up on, and then it's also right up on this ledge, and you can see the line going across here. And then one more thing that I'll get into in a little bit, because I've already tested this, is you can see this shadow here from some light down here or something like that hitting the ledge. So that's going to be another kind of a gradient that we have to deal with. So when you're laying your points for your mask, you need to be very aware of those lines. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit. But for this, since it appears, I think it's easier to just start at the very end. So that's where we're going to draw our mask out. And I'm going to zoom in even a little bit more to get as exact as I can. And this upper corner is going to be one of my anchors. I'm going to go just outside of that. And then this is a little bit hard to tell exactly where it is. I'm going to go right along the curtain line and back over there. And again, we'll come in and we will invert this. And there we go. So this one, we're going to work our way back by keyframes instead of forward, but it's no different. Go into transform, hit the position keyframe, come over here, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3. This doesn't move very much, so we're going to go 5 frames, 4, 5, and then we'll move that over just a tad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to move that over. You can always expand these too if you need to, if your cup is getting bigger or your object's getting bigger or further away or closer or anything like that. You can always play with these. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and play through this. And you see a little bit of wiggling. I probably didn't do a perfect job there, but it will suffice. So now we're gonna go ahead and turn this clip back on. And as you can see, the cup has reappeared, which is okay because we're going to take this, go into transform, and we're going to go ahead and find what we want to use. Now, this is where you need to be careful. I need to line up this line here. I'm not so worried about this shadow here. I am worried about this gradient. You can see it fading in a similar place and keeping this line straight, as well as the curtain pretty close. Now, a curtain is fabric, so it's wrinkly and whatnot. So I don't think the viewer is going to really notice that as much. And it looks like I maybe should have made my mask just a little bit bigger. You can start to see just a tiny bit of the edges showing up there. But let's see if we can get this to work. So that looks pretty good to me. That line is pretty well lined up. So now we're gonna go into the mask again on the upper clip, and we're gonna play with the feather and fall off. And one of the things with this is that you can't feather it too much, and that's what makes this really hard, because as you notice, not only do you introduce the cup, but you start to run into the curtain more. So I'm gonna push it as far as I can. I think there is pretty good. Let's see if we can get the fall off to be a little bit better. I'm gonna turn this one up actually. Let's see if we can turn this up a tiny bit. Something like that. And then one thing that I notice in this, so first off, I'm gonna mess around with the scale down here just a little bit, see if that helps at all. And I think it does. It gives me more space to feather and not hit that coffee cup. So yeah, I mean, I increased it 2% here maybe, and we are gonna just have to reposition this a tiny bit to line up those lines again. But it does give me a little more room to feather if I'm able to make that work. Yeah, something maybe like that, just to make it a little bit softer. Maybe even right there. You can see the lines a little bit here though still. Here it looks perfect to me, and up here the fade off a little bit. But one of the things that I noticed with this, and one thing to always pay attention to as well, is this, it feels a little bit brighter to me. So we're gonna go ahead into our color tab here, and we're gonna just bring down the exposure like 1 or 2. That looks better. That probably looks the best to me. So we're gonna go down 3 is what's looking, -3 is looking the best to me. So we're gonna hit done, and now we'll play through this. And that looks pretty darn good as is, and we are zoomed into 400%. So let's fit, and you can barely tell that that cup was there at all. Not only that, but of course your attention is going to be on the dress and not on the corner of the cup. But even with movement, even with strict lines that you need to abide by, you can remove that stuff in Final Cut. Now, one last thing that I add in these a lot, and I'm gonna go over both of them, is that this one, actually that looks pretty good. The first time I did it, and just something to be aware of, is in the mask itself, it didn't look like it was following quite the same speed to the left, kind of in with the camera, as the rest of the grass around it. So you can always go in there and you can take the bottom clip, go into your editor or into the transform section here at the very start of your keyframe, hit the keyframe button, and then you're just, like for this one, we're moving to the right, so everything is moving left, and I felt maybe it didn't move enough to the left, so I could keyframe the beginning one, and it's at -46.3, and then I could go to the end here, and I could keyframe it again, and maybe I could make it a little more, you know, -52 or something like that. And this is gonna be something you just have to play around with and see what the speed is. So that even, yeah, that adds just a little extra touch to make sure that that movement is, especially when you're, you know, zooming in and stuff like that, that movement keeps with the movement of your camera. And this one you could do something similar. I actually can't tell at all. That's one of the benefits here. Actually, it's looking a little bit dark. I can see it there in the corner. So I'm gonna try just bringing this to -2 now that I'm looking at it again. We need like an in-between, let's see. We don't do, so we're gonna keep it -3 because I think that's a little smoother. But one of the things that you could do here is you could also go back in if you felt like your mask was moving around a little bit too much, or you were, you know, having one of these lines move around, and you could go in here and you could do the same with the transform of the bottom clip, hitting a keyframe, and you could go zoom in, and you could go forward a couple frames, hit the keyframe button, and you could drag that to make sure that line is, in the transform here, to make sure that line is always lining up, if that makes sense. Similar to the first one, but a little more tedious. So there it is, guys, as close as you can get to a content-aware fill solution in Final Cut Pro X right now. It is definitely not as easy, certainly more time-consuming, and it will be limited, but with this tutorial you can begin to remove things from your shots that you might find distracting. Keep your fingers crossed that Final Cut has a quick answer to this mind-blowing technology introduced by Adobe. And if you have any problems or questions, leave them in the comments below. And as always, I'd love to have you like this video and subscribe and follow along for more videos.